I grew up in a family that could afford a lot of things, and from the age of 16, I started my own business. Achievements in this sphere did not take long to come. However, things did not work out on the personal front. I did not build a serious relationship until I met her. We got married, but after 3 months, our marriage ended because of her infidelity. My name is Martin. I'm 34 years old. My ex-wife, Elizabeth, was 5 years younger than me. We met at a friend's party 9 months before the wedding. Elizabeth immediately won me over with her beauty and openness, showing her gentle nature and desire for independence. I could offer her the freedom she desired because my business brought a stable high income. My friends and acquaintances had mixed opinions about Elizabeth. She was known as a fun party girl and not always faithful. However, that didn't stop me as I saw very different qualities in her, and part of my decision was my desire to prove something to myself. In those years, I was already set on starting a family and was sure that Elizabeth was the one I wanted to tie my life to. I proposed to her while vacationing on a private island. Our wedding turned into a real event that was the talk of the town. The event was covered by the media, and the public attention was tremendous. On our wedding day, Elizabeth and I decided that our home would have separate rooms for everyone to emphasize the importance of personal space in marriage. We respected each other's aspirations and provided space for personal growth. Trust was a key element of our relationship. It allowed us to support each other's well-being and maintain a healthy balance between our personal and couples' lives. I'll talk more about this in more detail later. To celebrate our wedding, I organized a cruise for Elizabeth and her friends. I hoped it would give her the freedom to enjoy special moments with loved ones. Despite her constant partying and night outings, I believed in her happiness and well-being. However, her behavior began to take a toll on our relationship. My wife admitted that she did not come from a wealthy family like mine, and adapting to our lifestyle was difficult for her. I tried to understand her point of view and decided to give her more time to adjust to the role of a rich man's wife. It has been almost 3 months since our wedding, and Elizabeth still lives in a separate room. Although we share moments of love and passion, there is still an emotional distance between us. This makes me wonder if there are deeper issues at play. I want to set the record straight and make her feel at home. I decided to wait a week before starting a heart-to-heart talk, hoping it would be a sensitive approach to our feelings and not hurt. I was bothered by all of this, despite her desire to live apart. To me, it seemed like the norm, if I may say so, as this was my first long-term relationship I wanted to build. One day, while gathering papers for a meeting, I noticed Elizabeth wasn't home. Curiosity prompted me to look around her room. I didn't have a clear purpose. I trusted her, but that day some inner force urged me to do so. While searching, I found in her room an invitation to a private party organized in her honor. The invitation praised her as the most beautiful woman deserving of every man's love. I was intrigued by this, especially learning that the party was being held at the private villa of my competitor, a well-known name in our niche. This surprised and infuriated me. Not understanding why this man had invited my wife, I nevertheless decided to visit the place. Concerned, I called Elizabeth. She said she would go to the party and spend the night at a friend's house there until the next night. Even though I trusted her, the decision to check out the situation on the spot still stood. Arriving at the party, I saw Elizabeth's car, which confirmed her presence. Trying to gather information discreetly, I peered out the window and saw men in varying degrees of undress, focused on something below. Puzzled, I was about to ring the doorbell when I saw Elizabeth among them. She was wearing only her panties and her breasts were bare. The sight shocked me. I was left speechless. One of the men approached Elizabeth and kissed her. She responded by laughing, and the other men began to cheer her on. Feelings of rage and frustration swept over me. I was determined to get Elizabeth out of this situation. Quickly heading towards the main entrance, I suddenly changed my mind and went back to the window. There I began to take notes on the party attendees. There turned out to be 7 men at it, all of whom were my business rivals, and of course Elizabeth. At that moment, I wanted to call for backup and break into their party to teach everyone there a lesson and disappoint my unfaithful wife. I pondered what action I could take against Elizabeth and these people. They were my competitors, and I could not allow them to manipulate me. As I left the villa, I thought about how I could embarrass them and how I could teach Elizabeth a lesson. I walked back to my car, stunned by what I had seen. I couldn't understand why Elizabeth would do such a thing. After all, I was providing her with everything she desired. Elizabeth returned home the next evening, acting calm despite the betrayal the night before. I kept my anger in check by playing nice. Asked her about the night spent with her friends. She described it as harmless fun. My thoughts, however, were centered on a plan of retribution. Consumed with anger, betrayal, and a thirst for revenge, I vowed to make them pay for their interference in my life. Pretending to be away on a business trip, I informed Elizabeth of the hiring of a personal secretary named Jennifer. When I introduced Jennifer to Elizabeth, I noticed her discomfort. I insisted that Jennifer always accompany me when I needed to go somewhere urgently. I clearly labeled her role in a way that annoyed Elizabeth and made her question our relationship. The next morning, Jennifer came into our bedroom to wake me up, which surprised Elizabeth. I apologized and left the house, saying I would be back in 2 weeks and stayed at a hotel. In the meantime, I closely monitored Elizabeth's actions and gathered information on the 7 party attendees by hiring a personal investigator. I gathered evidence to expose their actions. I wanted to make sure they paid for their decisions. Yes, Elizabeth made a mistake, but their exploitation of human weakness does not make them smarter personally or professionally. Elizabeth proved to be a unique case that prompted me to personally investigate her actions. It was a new experience for me, albeit a painful one. I decided to observe her behavior for 2 weeks in my absence. As she prepared to leave our home, I followed her car to see where she would be. She had chosen a hotel to meet Tony Phillip, my main competitor. Over lunch, they laughed and smiled, occasionally allowing themselves physical intimacy. After lunch, Phillip escorted her to his villa. I decided not to witness what happened in the evening. Tony was my enemy. In 2015, he tried to ruin my business using illegal methods. I had dealt with him once before by getting information about his business. I got the contact information of Tony's fiancée and anonymously informed her of the surprise Tony was planning. I gave her the address of the meeting. When she arrived, my bride guards helped her into the villa. Seeing Tony in a compromising situation, she confronted him face to face and threw her wedding ring at him. She subsequently decided to break off the engagement and withdraw her investment from his business. Tony even chose a wealthy wife to invest in his business. I took a similar approach with other men, exposing their infidelity and making sure they were responsible for the consequences. The final surprise for Elizabeth was when I decided to bring all the participants together. Invited Elizabeth, introducing her as the only woman who understood and did not judge them. All the men had lost their wives, perplexed as to how they knew about their infidelities. The party was held at the villa. I paid a security guard $1,000 to install hidden cameras throughout the villa, including the restrooms. There were about 70 people in attendance. When the evening began, I ran a live broadcast available on my company's and other companies' screens. In this way, the actions of the participants were on display for all to see. Everyone's cell phones were confiscated before entering the party. I made sure no one knew about the broadcast and thought it was a private event. The chaos of phones ringing after the reveal added to my satisfaction. Investigating Elizabeth, it became apparent that her feelings for me were insincere. She seemed to be driven by the financial benefits and privileges of being my wife. Thinking back, I recognized my mistake in falling in love with a man who showed the traits of a gold digger. It was my big mistake, for I could have predicted it in advance. Her pursuit of wealth was acceptable to her, but what bothered me was her desire to deceive me by posing as a faithful wife. She not only had affairs, but also relationships with people. I often interacted with them for work. Their expressions during business discussions hinted at their secret relationship with my wife, which was unacceptable to me. Exposing Elizabeth and sending a clear message to these men became my mission. I used video footage of the party to leave a message for Elizabeth about my imminent arrival. The cameras captured them in an intimate embrace. Elizabeth made it home in time, unaware of what awaited her. Upon my entrance with Jennifer, I greeted Elizabeth nonchalantly, giving all my attention to Jennifer, ignoring Elizabeth's feelings. Her ignoring left her in despair, indicating that my revenge plan was taking effect. After returning from my business trip, I strategically avoided Elizabeth. Her lovers had run into legal trouble and could not contact her. I blocked all contact and kept her in the dark about the videos. Elizabeth felt unwanted and ignored in her own home, where Jennifer was now doing household chores. Feeling alienated, Elizabeth complained to me about Jennifer's intrusion. I brushed off her concern, trying to convince her that it was normal, reinforcing the intellectual game. I suggested Elizabeth spend time with friends at the club, discreetly watching her while she entertained herself. Preparing for an unexpected turn of events she wouldn't forget, I eagerly awaited her reaction. Elizabeth returned drunk around midnight and found me on the couch with Jennifer sitting on my lap in front of me. Confused, Elizabeth approached and demanded an explanation. I invited her to join us, compounding her anger and accusing me of infidelity. She didn't realize I had orchestrated the final reveal as she stood next to me. I turned on the compromising footage on the home theater screen. Shock and disbelief reflected on Elizabeth's face as the reality of her actions unfolded before her eyes. She asked me where I had gotten the tapes. I admitted that I had made them myself. Elizabeth tried to find the words to explain, but she failed. There was a heavy silence in the room, emphasizing the depth of her guilt and regret. It was as if she had been caught in the act and could not find the right words. Sitting on the couch, I watched the footage with interest. Elizabeth looked from the screen to me uncertainly. It was unclear whether I was upset or amused by the situation. I expressed my appreciation for her interaction with one of the people whose skill I admired. With a gesture, I invited her to join me and go through the tapes together. She reluctantly agreed and bowed her head, fully aware of her mistake while watching. There was a look of discomfort on her face, indicating regret and a realization of impending consequences. After watching for 2 hours, I noted that it was amusing to emphasize her amazing connections with close friends who seemed comfortable in her presence. Elizabeth, realizing the seriousness of her actions, remained silent, only meekly apologizing. She explained that these men had convinced her to spend the night with them. Faced with pressure not to prevent them from winning, she attended the party. Impressed by her ability to make up stories, I pretended to agree, suggesting that she might have used our marital status to avoid the situation. However, she claimed she did so without wanting to tarnish her reputation and continued her persuasive game of feigning sympathy for her apparent victim. I directed her to the dining room table to pour water. I placed the glass on a piece of paper that held the same invitation she had hidden under the dresser. When the glass accidentally slipped out of my hands and shattered on the floor, Elizabeth realized it was useless to make up stories, for I already knew of her actions. Collapsing to the ground, she burst into tears, but tears were no salvation. After forcing her to confess everything, I made the painful decision to kick her out of the house, despite her pleas for another chance. I remained resolute, realizing that forgiveness was not an option in this case. It was a difficult choice, but I knew it was necessary. I had no desire to make room for a cheater in my heart and home. Elizabeth apologized, explaining her actions by explaining that she was unable to think clearly and was influenced by the wealth of those involved. However, having learned from my past, I stood firm, knowing that such mistakes should not be repeated to preserve my well-being and self-esteem in the future. I made a personal commitment. If I ever developed feelings for someone new, I would carefully evaluate whether they were suitable to be a part of my life. This valuable lesson was a direct result of the betrayal I experienced from Elizabeth. A week after I learned of her infidelity, I immediately had my attorney prepare divorce papers, ensuring that she would have no rights from me because of the chaos she had wrought in my life. I took measures such as distributing pictures and videos of her cheating to the media, which tarnished her reputation. I also warned large companies in advance against hiring her and continued to assign a private investigator to monitor her actions, maintaining awareness of her actions and my intent. I felt the need to make Elizabeth aware of the challenges she would face without my support. I wanted her to realize the consequences of her infidelity. I also took steps to make it difficult for her to find housing and employment. Elizabeth refused to agree to a consensual divorce and insisted on alimony. Her demands for money and property seemed impertinent to me. She even resorted to deception by falsely claiming to be pregnant in order to obtain alimony and property on behalf of the unborn child. I demanded a DNA test, which eventually revealed her lies and led to a defamation lawsuit and divorce. Elizabeth, who seemed like a wonderful woman to me, was motivated by financial gain. This explained her initial reluctance to share living space. The realization was painful, but I am grateful that I recognized her true intentions before the situation deteriorated. The expression "love is blind" has a special meaning for me now. This difficult journey involved both blindness and insecurity. Elizabeth not only destroyed our marriage, but also damaged my reputation. The judgmental looks and ridicule of others made it difficult for me to overcome the consequences of such a devastating revelation. Eventually, Elizabeth returned to her parents in a small town and took a job as a waitress at a local bar. I'm not gloating about her current situation. I genuinely feel sorry for Elizabeth. She could have built herself a happy future with me, and we could have had children, but she made her choice. I don't think these consequences are so harsh that she will face. Perhaps I am too kind, but I will not change my kindness. I believe that true heights are reached by those who are kind and happy. This situation has not made me disdain all women. On the contrary, I am sure that I will soon find one with whom I can live a long and happy life. So that's the end of this story. We think it was quite interesting. Do you think the main character did the right thing by leaving his ex-wife with nothing? He couldn't have realized earlier that he shouldn't marry this girl. After all, maybe the protagonist realized everything from the beginning, and it was all planned by him to destroy the reputation of his competitors. One might think that the protagonist is a bit naive since he decided to marry a promiscuous girl. But on the other hand, don't you think he did it on purpose? As the text says, his competitors had already committed illegal acts and wanted to ruin his business. Then why not take revenge? As you can see, there can be many versions here, and we will be interested to read yours. So don't be shy and write in the comments what you think. We believe that the main character did the right thing, and we truly believe that this is not a planned action against competitors, but just a coincidence. We're glad the protagonist learned a valuable lesson from this story. We also hope you learned something useful. Subscribe to the channel and put likes. Good luck to everyone!